ladies and gentlemen, we might make a start. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the ACT branch of the AIIA. My name is Heath McMichael and I'm branch president. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past and present. I'd also like to acknowledge the Ambassador of Kosovo, Mr Mira Berdinjai, and also Ambassador from Albania, and colleagues also with visitors from Kosovo. And I should say that all of this was on the strength of a coffee I shared with Jet Mira back in February. So we're very pleased that we could have this result today and having you here, sir. Our speaker tonight will outline Kosovo's journey towards statehood since 2008, after a difficult gestation in the various wars and conflict in the former Yugoslav Republic. Australia is indeed a long way from the Balkans. The Kosovar, and although that is true, the Kosovar and Albanian diaspora have been active in the community here. So it's not surprising that this country was one of the first to recognise Kosovo's statehood 16 years ago. It's a great honour to welcome to the ACT branch His Excellency Mr Kreshnik Ahmeti, the Deputy Foreign Minister of the Republic of Kosovo. Mr Ahmeti is making his first visit to Canberra during his tour of the Pacific region. Now, the Deputy Minister has been active in politics since 2010, when he joined the LVV movement on completion of undergraduate studies at the University of Pristina, postgraduate business studies at North Dakota State University. Mr Ahmeti was elected to the Pristina municipal government in 2013, and in 2019 he was appointed Secretary for Foreign Relations and a member of the LVV presidency. In the government of Prime Minister Kurti in 2020, he was Chief of Cabinet to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, managing the ministry's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And in April 2021, he became Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs with responsibility for international organisations and bilateral relations with Europe, Africa, the Middle East, Asia and Oceania. So let me also say that in addition to politics, Mr Ahmeti has been active in FM radio in the early days, the good old days, and also in several rock bands. So we won't quiz him on his musical knowledge tonight. As per our normal format, the Deputy Minister will speak for about 20 minutes or so. Then we will take questions both from the floor and from our online participants using the Q&A function on Zoom, please. So we aim to finish at 7 p.m. and let me hand over the floor to our visitor.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having us here and for organizing this event, and to all of you for being present. As you mentioned, together with my delegation, we're having rather short trip in the region, and I was happy to start it in Australia. And officially, we started the visit yesterday, the agenda. We had meetings at DFAT, we had meetings at the Parliament, and I have to say, unsurprisingly, all those meetings were excellent. We, of course, are on the same side of values and principles, and that creates possibilities to move forward to strengthen further our bilateral relations. Unofficially, I was here since Saturday. So I used the chance because we couldn't find tickets to come on time when we planned, so we had to come a day early. Right. So I used the chance to meet our community in Sydney, which it's really a community that has integrated well and is successful in academia, in public offices, in private sector, which really shows that they have found home here. A good portion of that community is from the wave of 1999, when Australia welcomed and hosted around 4,000 refugees from Kosovo, and we are forever grateful for that. The majority of those refugees went back, and that wasn't an exception. During the war, around half of the population became refugees, expelled out of the country, and 80% of the population, including internally displaced, were displaced from their houses. All of them, 1 million people, went back within 1 month after liberation. It showed willingness and courage to go back and build a new future in liberty. As I believe the majority knows, Kosovo declared independence in 2008. Declaration of Independence in itself is a kind of a unilateral act because you're independent. Ours was a bit different, more an outcome of a multilateral process. We were in a rather long process of negotiations in Vienna, which were facilitated by the special envoy of the Secretary General of UN, the late President Matti Ahtisaari, who proposed a package for the status of Kosovo, which was independence. For some years monitored, but nonetheless independent. And we declared independence in February 2008. And in 2010, after Serbia raised the question to ICJ, International Court of Justice, the opinion of the International Court of Justice was that the Declaration of Independence of Kosovo did not violate general international law, Resolution 1244, or the constitutional framework within which Kosovo was functioning. So back prior to that, Kosovo used to be a country administered by United Nations, which needed help and support in considerable sectors of life. Now we have a completely different story. Kosovo is an independent state which has become a partner to the like-minded countries. If we used to be refugees 25 years ago, now we are hosting refugees from Afghanistan, from Ukraine. If we needed international intervention in order to bring peace, now our army is going to co-deployments with a number of our partners in peacekeeping missions. If we were victims of mines that were left behind from the war, now we are training Ukrainian women on demining from our painful experience that we learned. So Kosovo, with its modest capacities, now is contributing to peace and stability in the region and in the world. In our region, I have to say that Kosovo is a rare example of both economic and democratic progress. And I get these two pillars because we know that not only in our region, authoritarian tendencies are increasing. And the main narrative of authoritarians is that you cannot have both. You can have either democracy or economic development because liberties are an obstacle to economic development. I mean, the authoritarian way, point of view. Of course, we do not believe that. And we have, in our case, our own case to be convinced that that is not true. In democracy, Kosovo has developed a lot, especially in recent years. In the matter of rule of law, we have taken a big campaign to work against corruption and organized crime, which has put us in on top of the list of the region in a matter of rule of law. We also worked a lot to reform the judicial system. And we are doing this hand to hand with the Council of Europe and its mechanisms, like the Venice Commission. For example, all the new strategies and laws were taken into the Venice Commission, and each and every one of their recommendations was implemented. Now, I have to say that rule of law and justice can also be used by authoritarians as kind of arguments. But in case of Kosovo, you have independent international organizations such as Freedom House, for example, which states that there has been tangible progress in civic liberties in recent years. Likewise, in political rights. VDEM, Variety Democracies, the institute states that Kosovo has had immense progress in democracy. And also Freedom House, Reporters Without Borders has stated that Kosovo has had progress in media freedom. So rule of law and reforming justice, the judicial system is not done with the cost of political rights, civic liberties, and media freedom. On the contrary, it has given more oxygen to that. On the other pillar, economy. All this work in democracy and civic liberties were not obstacles to progress economically. In the last 3 years, the average annual GDP growth in Kosovo was around 6 to 7%. The IMF projections for this year are 4%. FDIs have doubled. Exports have doubled. State revenues have increased by 2/3 and without changing any fiscal policies. And I believe this is because there has been a big campaign against corruption and organized crime. So people trust the institutions and they are more willing to, how to say, legitimize their businesses and their transactions. We also worked on inflation, which has been really high. We had 2.5 years ago around 12% inflation, and within 1 year, now currently the projections for this year are 2.5%. So in general, there's progress also economically. What we're doing, our LVV, which in Albanian is Divisa Vendosje, in English it means Movement for Self-Determination. The political party is a social democratic party. So all this economic progress and development, we are trying to redistribute it, because we believe that without having a solid and strong middle class, it is really difficult to have solid and strong democracy. So we have a number of programs in order to redistribute all this state wealth, so to say, and incomes. Like we've increased minimum wage, we are subsidizing private sector to increase their wages. All public education in all levels, including universities, are now tuition free. We are working a lot also to create more opportunities for women. 10 years ago, a man needed 3 to 4 interviews to get a job, a woman 8 interviews. So we saw that there is also a big gap within the workforce. So what we're doing now, we're giving scholarship, for example, one of the examples for women exclusively on science, engineering, technology, and math. Because one of our main sectors now is in ICT. There's a lot of development there. In general, this has also reflected positively in our approach in foreign affairs. Our goal as Kosovo is to establish as much as we can diplomatic relations and also to join international organizations. We are in around 200 international organizations if we also include sports organizations. Currently, we are in a process of joining Council of Europe, which is really important, not only in the sense of statehood and sovereignty, but especially for the rights of the citizens, and in this case, especially for minorities. We are having a period this year of integration of minorities, and especially Serb minority, which is requesting more Kosovo passports, is converting all their documents and these technicalities into legitimate Kosovo documents. So we want all this progress, be that with minorities, all the ones that I already mentioned in democracy and all of that, to be locked in a way, not to slide back in the future. And we believe Council of Europe is the main mechanism to have that, because in the future, our citizens will have the right to go to European Court of Human Rights, which now they don't. So a supranational level will be will help that. We also applied for European Union membership. Now there we have a bit of a more peculiar situation because of their decision making. Because in Council of Europe, out of 46 countries, 12 of them are yet to recognize Kosovo. But the decisions are taken by 2/3, not unanimity. But in EU, you need unanimity. And we have 5 countries that are member states that are yet to recognize Kosovo. There are some cases that EU has taken this approach, as they call it, diversity and recognition, unity and engagement in regards to Kosovo. For example, we were able to have a stabilization association agreement that we have now with EU. We have visa liberalization, which needed unanimity as a decision. So we believe it is possible also to progress in the process of membership. NATO is also one of our main goals, NATO membership. I have to say, unfortunately, now it has become a priority, because unfortunately, the discussions of well-being within our region now are, how to say, are put back from discussions and concerns of security because of what's happening really all over the world. In a way, conflicts are being normalized, unfortunately. Kosovo and its citizens in general are really pro-democratic and what we call over there pro-Western. And around 94% of our citizens are in favor of NATO integration membership, and 93% of the citizens are in favor of European Union integration. So there is no, whoever is in power, there is no big political shifts in sense of foreign policy. I would stop here. I just wanted to give you a brief of where Kosovo stands currently and what the developments are. And I look forward more to a discussion than to me presenting.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Deputy Minister. So we might go straight to questions, I think. If you do have one, please let us know who you are and speak loudly so we can hear you online. Bill.
Yes, William Maley from the Australian National University. I was wondering if you could say something about the state of bilateral relationship with Belgrade, given the obvious historical challenges that result from that relationship.
Yes, of course. Thank you. That's a really important topic for us. And it takes a lot of time and energy as a government, whoever is in government. Serbia, unfortunately, is yet to recognize our independence. And in their constitution, they have us as part of their territory. Even though International Court of Justice, because of their, they initiated the process, has said that it didn't violate any international law or Resolution 1244. We started a process of dialogue in 2011, which lasted 10 years, the first process. The outcome of the process was 39 agreements. Unfortunately, nearly 2/3 of them are not implemented and respected by Belgrade. While from our side, we are in a dialogue in Brussels to see how we should implement one of the agreements, otherwise we have implemented all the others. The one agreement that it's part of the discussion, not exclusively that, is the Association of Serb Majority Municipalities. With the new process of dialogue, which is still ongoing, we have a new agreement, which in a way summarizes all the others. This is the agreement of 27th of February of last year in Brussels, basic treaty, which is an agreement not for normalization yet, unfortunately, but to path towards normalization. It is a de facto recognition, de facto mutual recognition. We heard ambiguity right after the meeting where the agreement was, the text was agreed upon. The EU facilitator, the High Representative Borrell, said that the agreement is binding, and it will become binding at the moment that we publish it into EU's official website, and it was published. We were asking to sign the agreement, both parties. Belgrade was not ready, and afterwards we started to hear ambiguity. Yes, we agreed, but not just a part of it. Yes, we agreed, but we have our red lines, this kind of narratives. And unfortunately, we are yet to come into an agreement on the sequencing to implement that basic treaty. Because what we agreed in Brussels, us, Belgrade, and EU as a facilitator, was to have a balanced implementation in order for neither party to get to some point where they get enough and then they stop the process of implementation. On 13th of December, there was a letter from former Prime Minister of Serbia, who is now Speaker of Parliament, that basically withdraws Serbia from that basic agreement. So we are in this peculiar situation that we don't know what their position is. On the other hand, we had a really concerning development on 24th of September last year, when we had a clear aggression from Serbia through a terrorist attack inside Kosovo from a paramilitary group, which accounted to around 100 people with military-grade weapons. We and our police officers dealt with it professionally in order for the situation not to escalate, because that was the goal. And the terrorist group withdrew. They fled to Serbia. They are still free. They are not in prison, even though they publicly admitted to killing one of our police officers inside Kosovo territory. And from what we gathered, the evidence afterward, what we confiscated was 5 million euros of military weapons, and also documents that clearly show that the weapons were provided by the official Serbian army with stamps and signatures. We are yet to see any kind of consequences from, let's say, EU and the others in regards to this development. And what we're concerned is that if there are no consequences, then there is no cost to do such maneuvers in the region. It's not only in the north of Kosovo that there is risk in our region, and the spillover effect is really high. It was a really unfortunate event, but the fortunate side was that now there is no risk within. So there is rule of law even in that part where we had that attack. And now the situation is stable, calm, and as I mentioned, the Serb community also is integrating. And from a number of international researches and surveys, two important dynamics are seen. The first one is that the Serb community, the trust of the Serb community towards the Kosovo police has increased, and also their sense of security has increased, and it is the highest since after the war. Not where we want it to be yet, but it is a positive trend. So now we're waiting for the new EU administration to be settled and to see how the dialogue will continue. But we will persist in dialogue because we believe that's the only sustainable way to move forward to find a solution to our bilateral relations. Margaret.
Margaret Cheney, formerly of DFAT. I think we can all understand the difficult history between Serbs and Kosovars. But could you speak a little bit about how much influence you think Russia has in your region and your situation? And part two of the question, we spoke briefly before the formal meeting about your aspirations for UN membership and the barrier that Russia presents there.
Yes, thank you. We never had difficulties with Serbs. We had difficulties with regime in Belgrade. The fight and resistance for liberation was never against the Serbs as such, but against a regime. And Russia is present in the region a lot, especially through Serbia. There is this so-called humanitarian center in south of Serbia, in a city called Niš, which is a public secret that it is not a humanitarian center. And when the turmoil was happening in north of Kosovo, we found evidence which was being made public, the footage that the groups that were armed within that turmoil had supplies with the logo of that so-called humanitarian center. Within Kosovo, Russia has three institutions that they use and misuse. The first one is their own liaison office. They opened that liaison office while we were under United Nations administration through Resolution 1244. And then, even though we declared independence, in a way they continue to exist in that parallel reality. And also, they have presence in OSCE and in United Nations mission in Kosovo. So that is how they're present, and I don't think they have, I would say, amicable approach towards our country, even within these three institutions. Regarding UN, I think for the foreseeable future, it is really challenging because we have to go through Security Council to become a full member in that. And there is Russian Federation and also China, which is also the second one that does not recognize Kosovo.
Yes, Jane.
Jane Hardy, formerly of DFAT also, and now a non-resident senior fellow at the US Studies Centre. It's great to have you here. Welcome. Your description shows and demonstrates enormous pressures on Kosovo, a small country, a new country, yet you also seem to have forged great internal cohesion, social cohesion. What would you say is the main driving factor to forge that social cohesion? And I have another part to the question, sorry. Are there instances, or do you observe pressure through economic persuasion or coercion by major players within your country to perhaps divide or to push you in a certain direction?
Thank you. There was the case, for example, with recent developments in the Middle East, and it was interesting to see the reaction of our citizens, which showed solidarity and asked for peace, but the reaction was not religious.
Mm.
You had liberal groups marching, you had left-wing groups, students marching, and I think this is because of our history, because the main primary identity was a national identity, not religious identity. Now, Kosovo is a multi-ethnic state. The demography is around 93% Albanians, 3 to 4% Serbs, and the others other minorities. Nonetheless, we are multi-ethnic. From 38 municipalities, because we have only two levels of power, central and municipal, local. For 38 municipalities, 10 of them are municipalities with Serb majority municipalities, which have added rights in comparison to the others. So, in a way, the cohesion is kept because people understand how it came to be as such. It was compromise, have independence, acknowledging the historical context. And I think also these economic and financial programs help to foster this cohesion within ethnic communities. So it's also historical, but there are proactive steps that the government can take to help it. We economically, as I mentioned, our citizens are really pro-European. So it's difficult to penetrate if a country or a company does not endorse the values and principles that our citizens do. There have been attempts. They did not work out. Now, some third parties are trying otherwise to go to have influence into academia, have influence into local level, in order to bypass the central level. But I think it's challenging because it is a country that genuinely aspires to be a member of EU and NATO. And whatever is in contradiction to that aspiration, really it's difficult to gain ground in Kosovo. But yes, there have been cases. Now, there might be cases of, intermediary businesses, coming for the other's capital that is a bit more challenging and difficult to identify and act upon. But directly and openly, it's really difficult.
Deputy Minister, while we're talking about the economy, I'd like to ask, you mentioned some rather good figures there in GDP terms, 4 to 6%, and a very nice result in terms of taming inflation. Would only be the envy of people in this country, I think. But let me ask what you see as the growth prospects in the economy of Kosovo, where the growth areas are. Mm-hmm. I note that Kosovo has a high rating in terms of the Human Development Index, 7.6% out of 10, I think it is, which suggests that the other point that you mentioned, the ICT sector and education, these sorts of service industry or service-oriented industries might be the way forward for the Kosovo economy. Would you care to comment on that?
Yes. So the sectors that are booming are mainly in ICT, and 2/3 of the services are going for exports. And you have to understand, when I mention numbers, we are 1.8 million inhabitants. So there are around 20 to 30,000 young people who really, because of their passion and talent, make this sector work. So it's not like the state, the government gave them a lot in order for them to be successful. So ICT is a sector that is booming, that we're now, as a government, trying to cooperate in order to create more platforms for it to grow. Also, wood processing, it's a sector that is really growing. We're importing wood from European countries, processing it, mostly these houses, and our economy, our companies are selling it mostly to Austria, Germany, and Switzerland. And why these three countries, which takes us to another pillar of our economy, is our diaspora. Our diaspora is mostly based in these countries. We have 500,000 Kosovo citizens or with origin from Kosovo in Germany alone, 250,000 in Switzerland. And they create this opportunity for our companies to penetrate into these markets. But also what they do is they send a lot of remittances. So our state expenses, our government expenses are 3.3 billion euros annually. And our diaspora annually sends 1.2 billion euros. Just to give you a comparison of how big that is for our country. Now, this is really good, but we have to find a way to channel those funds into investments. Because our trade deficit used to be 3 years ago 1 to 9. Now we have lowered that to 1 to 6, but it's still big. Which means that when we get all these remittances, which goes to families, that they spend it into consumption, then it ricochets immediately out of the country. So we need to find a way how we can invest in the country, keep them in. Also, foreign direct investments, a big portion of them come from our diaspora. And a big portion of their investment, foreign direct investment, go to real estate, which again has the same issue. We import most of the raw material and it goes out of the country. And we need to find ways to channel both of these, let's say, funds, assets. And we are working into some changes into the structure of our economy. For example, starting in 2005, the privatization agency under United Nations mission back then was established. And the majority of our public and state-owned companies were sold, privatized. And yes, some of them were successful after they were privatized, but a number of them, they changed their category of economy from production, for example. The majority of them went to retail. And the effect that had was that we had around 80,000 people unemployed just because of the privatization process. So what we're doing, we have created a sovereign fund, which will not be controlled by the government, but by the parliament. And the sovereign fund will manage now whatever is left unprivatized up to this point, public and state-owned enterprises, and invest in them, but also sell shares. And our goal is to sell them to our diaspora in order to have these FDIs that go to retail channel to production. So this is the prospect of how we see our economy continue.
Do you have what some countries have, a brain drain? Or how do you deal with that?
Yes, our last census in 2011, we were 1.8 million inhabitants. In the census that just ended, I believe the results will be published this month actually. The preliminary results show that we are 1.6 million, which means within these years we lost 200,000 people approximately. This is a general trend in the region, and I believe not only in the region, because on the other hand, we are seeing interest of workforce from a number of other countries, such as Philippines, Bangladesh, Nepal, to come and work to Kosovo. So it's kind of a world trend. What we're doing, we're trying to bring back the know-how from our diaspora. When I say the know-how, I mean not necessarily bring them physically back. Today, you do not have to be physically somewhere in order to contribute. One of the programs, in order to link the young generation of our diaspora, which was not born in Kosovo, but somewhere else, is what we did with our ministry. My colleague, the other deputy minister, we are two deputy ministers. The other deputy minister, Lisa Gosh, she deals with diaspora. She's an expert on that field. So she established a program where fellows who are students who live abroad, but with origins from Kosovo, they come to our government in all of the ministries and can work for 6 to 12 months. And they get rather good payment into considering the level of wages in Kosovo. And they contribute by making researches, doing projects and as such. But the positive outcome that we saw afterwards from the first cohort was that 60% of them still live in Kosovo. They never lived in Kosovo before. Some of them work in our ministries, some in civil society. Now we have the second cohort, which is bigger than the first one. So this is just one of the programs of how we are trying to bring back the know-how from our diaspora, but there are different approaches from all the ministries and institutions.
Very good. Any other comments or questions? Yes.
I'm Sophia from Ukraine and see, I have a question. I was wondering, what do major like Western powers like US or Canada or other big global Western powers can do, or what help is needed possible to kind of help development of democracy there, or just helping development of the region, or helping Kosovo join all these international organizations? You said that you were on a trip to develop more diplomatic relations, but obviously I was more wondering what these major Western powers can do to help Kosovo right now. What kind of help is needed?
Yes, they were a major factor into our successes, right? Even while we were under United Nations administration, rebuilding, creating institutions, but also after we declared our independence, the support to establish bilateral relations, diplomatic relations with other countries was immense. We couldn't have done it without big powers such as the ones that you mentioned and the others. We had big waves of recognition on the initial years, and it was because of that support. Also in regards to membership in international organizations, but also internally. We had big support to, as I mentioned, establish institutions, advance the work of all the institutions in Kosovo. But now we come to this point, I believe, is also the change in generations in a demographic sense, that we are becoming more of partners than a country in need of help. So we gained a lot from their help before, and now we're trying to share experiences. Because we have in the majority of sectors the capability to work in a way on our own, but this does not mean that we do not coordinate closely with them, especially with the United States, Great Britain. Yeah, what should be done is just to continue the approach that they had until now, that the approach that we currently have.
Yes, Mark.
I'd be very interested to know, particularly from a foreign policy view, but for others, how Kosovo dealt with the COVID pandemic.
It was really challenging for us to be tested with such a situation. Back then, we had just taken, because this is our second government, the second time we are in power. Over 3 years now, but the first government lasted just some months. So it was really difficult to deal with it. The first two main difficulties were to get the vaccines and also to bring back the people that were locked in other countries. There was a lot of work to do that, but when you have an economy that does not have its own airlines, and as a state you do not have aircrafts, it is really difficult. We took all the measures of how we call it, restrictive measures immediately, and we communicated a lot with the citizens. So every night our Minister of Health was in all the TV stations and press conferences, telling people what to do, because we all know that in the beginning we didn't know what we are being challenged with and what measures we should take. I remember when we came back in the second government, which was in March 2021, we established immediately, we signed contracts to get vaccines, and we got all the three kinds of vaccines. Now I forgot the names: AstraZeneca, Pfizer, and the other one,
Moderna.
yes, and they're not.
No, no Sputnik.
No, we were offered
Yeah.
other
Oh,
vaccines.
no.
We did not, even while we didn't have these three, we did not accept it.
That was one of the best because it
And
was conventional mode, but the virus spread it.
San Marino took
Yeah.
Sputnik because the Italians were too slow to.
yeah, so we waited a bit, and then we got all the vaccines and we managed it well. We were one of the countries on the European level of countries that obviously administer the vaccination of its citizens. And yeah, so I can't remember all the details now to be genuine with you. I think it's a mechanism of my brain trying to be happy. You know, suppressing.
Only just the overall of after the COVID, the death toll, how much it was compared with infected.
I'm sorry, I don't
Not
know
only just, yeah.
number.
Then it was a lot.
Are there any other questions? Yes, Bill.
Yes, I was wondering, you mentioned demography. Is the population within Kosovo an aging population? And in a way, for example, that we've seen in Italy, with respective falls in absolute numbers. And if so, does that create an incentive to encourage some of the refugees whom you mentioned to make Kosovo a permanent home rather than simply a point of transit for resettlement to
In Kosovo, that is not the case. The average age, according to the 2011 census, is 31 years old. And our preliminary reports from the current census is 36. So what we see is, yes, we lost a part of our young population, but it's still relatively young. So in our case, that is not an issue.
One of the questions online, the Deputy Minister was asking about Kosovo's taking of the refugees in comparison with some of your neighbours in terms of, you know, numbers and with respect to your population and so on. Have you got a comment about that?
As much as I know, all of our neighbors took refugees. In case of refugees from Afghanistan, I'm not sure. I cannot say we were the only ones, but we had this agreement with the US to take some thousands of refugees for a temporary time, and then until they were scanned, and then they went to US. But some of them are still in Kosovo. And Ukrainians is a moderate number, not a big number. We were ready to host up to 6,000 refugees and committed to that, but we were not approached in order to host them. What we have mostly, we were trying to have programs. For example, we have Ukrainian journalists. So we are providing offices for them to work. We are providing wages, living expenses. So they can work from Kosovo while they cannot work from home. So we are trying this kind of to establish this kind of programs and help from Kosovo. But as much as I know, all the Western Balkans, the six countries host refugees.
Very good. Now, are there any other questions? Yes, Penny.
Thank you. Penny Wensley, Fellow of the Institute, former diplomat. I'm particularly interested in global environmental challenges. And obviously, we're all seeing everywhere, all around the world, more and more instances of extreme weather events. What's the level of environmental consciousness, I guess, in the population of Kosovo? And how much a priority is it for the government in terms of its foreign policy and domestic policy?
The level of awareness is increasing because we are seeing I cannot say complete, but really we are seeing clearly a change of seasons. We used to have snow from November onwards. Now we have snow for a short time in February. We didn't used to have such hot summers like we do now. So it's clear to everyone that climate change is real. In our country, the main issue that we have in regards to environment is the way that we produce our energy. 96% of our energy is produced by coal and is lignite coal, which is the, how you say, not the rich.
Brown.
Yes. So we inherited that system from former Yugoslavia. And on the one hand, it is independence in the sense of energy supply. But on the other hand, it's really bad for the environment, but also for the health of the citizens. Now we were in big discussions internally, politically, on how we should move forward. There was an alternative to have gas, LNG from Greece, from their major point in Alexandroupolis. But we have zero infrastructure for gas. So gas is a transitory means of energy. And until we build all the infrastructure, it might end as a transitory means. So in the end, we drafted and approved a strategy, because of which we will go from coal into directly to alternative renewable energy. Now what we're doing is, so we have renewable energy around 6%, generate around 6% of the total generation. We are having these auctions. Our Ministry of Economy is having auctions on solar panels to get licenses to produce energy through solar panels or wind. So we had the first auction, which was also kind of a test with the US agency supported us on this. And there is a European company that won the bid to get the license to produce energy in a certain place for solar panels. Now, since June, we started the auction for wind energy, and we'll continue like this. And the strategy is really aggressive in the sense of trying to change the situation as soon as possible. So this is our main battle within the battle of climate change.
Thank you.
And you're a landlocked country, essentially, but you have a good relationship with Albania in terms of the port facilities onto the Adriatic, I suppose.
Yes, we do. We have our customs there in Durrës. And what we're working now together with Albania is to build a railway from Pristina to Durrës, where the main port in Albania is. And that we believe that also helps the environment. But on the other hand, this is our long-term project of having Pristina, our capital city, as a dry port. Because from Pristina, you are 3 hours away from Durrës port, 3 hours away from Bar port in Montenegro, 3 hours away from Thessaloniki port in Greece. On the other hand, you are an hour and a half away, a flight away from most capitals in Europe and also in Istanbul, in Turkey. So it's geographically, we have the advantage of being in the center of the Western Balkans, and we are trying to take advantage of that.
Very good. All right. Well, unless I see any other questions, we might draw a line under the conversation so far. Thank you. It's been enlightening indeed to hear the Deputy Minister's comments about your path towards statehood, and particularly in the political, the economic and diplomatic frameworks.